Only a year old, Britain's Charlie Gard is in the terminal stages of a rare disease. The state wants him to die with dignity. Charlie's parents want to bring him to the United States for experimental treatment that might offer him a lifeline. Who should make this ultimate decision? Here to discuss this and much more is Director of Education at the National Catholic Bioethics Center, neuroscientist Father TAD PACHOLCZYK. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
Let's start with this disease, which I didn't realize. Charlie Gard is only one of 16 people in the world who suffer from this.
That's correct. It's exceedingly rare. It's a problem with a part of his cells that make energy. And as you look at him, he looks really lethargic, sleepy, and that's because his cells are not making the needed energy. So this experimental treatment that everybody is talking about might help his cells to recover the ability to start generating energy again.
Now, the Church has spoken out on this. The Pontifical Council, or the Pontifical Academy of Life, issued a kind of vague statement, and then the Pope came back and said, no, we offer support for Charlie and his parents, and we're willing to offer support here, medical support. What is the opinion of the Church on this issue of ventilators? There are a lot of people on ventilators now.
Right, and I think when people look at Charlie's case, they say, does the Church have a definitive position specifically for Charlie?
Right.
In other words, should he be unplugged? Should he be allowed to continue? And really, that has to be evaluated on a case-by-case basis by preferably his parents. This is something where they have to ask about the benefits and the burdens, and at a certain point, ventilators do become potentially heroic, and it won't be unreasonable to turn them off. I would say in the case of Charlie, because there's all this discussion about the other experimental treatment, there is an argument to be made, at least in the short term, for perhaps continuing that ventilation.
Now, the parents want this experimental treatment, and look, there's some cases in the United States where the experimental treatment not only saved these children, but extended their lives. They have healthy lives. The question is, who should decide? And there are some in the UK and across Europe who are saying, this will only prolong Charlie's suffering, Father. The Church would say.
All right. Well, I mean, I think the first question is it true that it's going to just prolong his suffering? When you talk to his parents who visit him every day, they say, it's clear Charlie is not suffering. The physician who just visited from Columbia University looked at him, and, you know, it appeared that he was not in any distress to speak of. So the question here is, would this experimental treatment exacerbate his condition or make it worse? There's no reason to believe that. It's not some big surgery that they're proposing. What they're actually proposing is more or less, let's give him some pills, some special pills that will make up for the missing enzymes that he needs.
Why do the courts and the state, the UK in this case, why do they insist on making the decision about Charlie's care?
Well, this is where the rub of the whole case is. We have a situation that we have a child, we have mom and dad who desperately want to take care of their own child. And the question is, should it be permitted that they make decisions on his behalf?
Well, they raised £1 million at this point.
They did. They certainly did.
Open their own wallets.
So, I mean, should it be the parents, or should it be an ethics committee? Should it be the hospital? Should it be the court system here that's actually taking the prerogative to make the decision? Now, in the U.S., this would be pretty clear how it would play out, in the sense that the parents' decision-making would be respected. In Great Britain, the emphasis is on what are the best interests of the child, and they always frame it in those terms and say, okay, the best interest of the child, the best interest of the child, we as the court are going to determine what those are. We are going to hand down a decision that states what those best interests are, and we've concluded here the best interests would be for him to be let go, no longer do anything for him, and that's our judgment. Now, that's subject to change, and that's why they brought in the physician from Columbia.
Is it because it's a single-payer system, it's national health care, and therefore the government is funding this care, and therefore they can preside over and decide who gets it and who doesn't?
Well, that's hard to say in this case, because there's actually been some debate on specifically that question as to whether this is connected to it being a single-payer system or not. Other commentators have noted that if The mother and father of Charlie had been independently wealthy before all of this began, before they did the fundraising. They could have taken Charlie, put him in a private hospital in Britain, and they could have taken him out, taken him to another country,
whatever they felt
basically done whatever they wanted.
Wow.
But because they got enmeshed in the NHS system in Britain, they haven't been able to. And the child, Raymond, in effect, is held hostage here. That's the situation that's so tragic. The parents are struggling to get permission to attend meetings about future treatment decisions. It's really an awkward situation. They go to court and they feel like they're not being adequately represented.
Well, the mother believes that the attorney assigned to them to advocate on their behalf, they find out the woman is chairman of a Dying with Dignity, Death with Dignity group in the UK.
Exactly.
So they feel, wait a minute, our advocate here may not be our advocate.
May not be on our side at all. And that's another angle here that has come to light as this case is played out. There's a lot of strange dynamics that are involved in this. The fact that it has basically gone to the courts, and even now that the courts will not yield, they in a sense seem to be in a position of handing down a decision, kind of looking down their nose and saying, we're the supreme authority here. And that's really where it would be so different from in this country. In this country, it would go to the courts only if there were clear evidence that the parents were somehow radically failing the child or maybe outright abusing the child. Then you would appoint a guardian ad litem and the court could step in. But in Britain, it's been turned backwards in this way. And I suggest to you this is kind of a problem of what we call subsidiarity, to use that fancy word, that the decisions are not being made on the right level. It should be at the level of the family, and not that the government or other levels of bureaucracy are stepping in and doing this. That is, at the end of the day, the mark of totalitarian types of systems. When the family is disrupted and decision-making can't occur as it should for the good of all the members of the family.
Now, the Church teaches that any outside assistance, like a ventilator, is an extraordinary means, yes?
Well, no, not automatically, because, for example, remember the case of Christopher Reeve.
Okay.
He had a ventilator for a few years after his equestrian accident,
Right.
and I would say for his set of circumstances, it probably wasn't extraordinary.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
there'd be a legitimate argument to say that he had he had the money to pay for it. He had a good care team. It wasn't too much burden for him. It gave him significant benefit for a long time. So it's case by case.
And in Charlie's case, you believe this is not extraordinary?
Well, in Charlie's case, we have to evaluate it in light of the total set of circumstances.
There might be a possibility.
There might be a possibility of some benefits here through this treatment, especially after the visit of this specialist who said it's not just 10%, it might be 10% to 50% chance of benefit. That's nothing to sneeze at.
Yeah. Why do you think this case has garnered such attention around the globe? Clearly it's a little infant, and that moves people, and the plight of the parents.
I think so. When you see such a young couple, attractive couple, desperately fighting, the mother is she's like a protective mother bear. And every woman understands this and has the sentiment of wanting to take care of your child. And here, your ability to make very basic decisions is being withdrawn, and withdrawn repetitively as you go higher and higher up the court systems. This went all the way to the European Union courts, which backed the hospital. So it's a terrible thing, and I think every family, I know when I've spoken to my sisters, they're like, gee, if this was one of my kids, and they weren't letting me make the basic decisions here, good heavens, this is totally backwards.
Yeah, no, it's gotten international attention for good reason. Now, here in D.C., in 2016, they passed a Death with Dignity Act. It allows any 18-year-old to request that his doctor twice prescribe life-taking medications, and then the doctor can grant them. So you can basically euthanize yourself here in the District of Columbia. It has taken it a year, but now they are implementing the law. Where do you think this will go?
I think this is going to go, as it did overseas in the Netherlands, in some very bad directions. At the moment, it's only to let you commit suicide. But already in Oregon, there has been an initiative where this is legal also to say, what about euthanasia, where the doctor becomes the killer, not just the prescriber, but the actual killer. And that hasn't passed yet, thankfully, there, but I think it's only a matter of time. And the logic here then extends itself in a lot of other directions where we say, well, what are the reasons going to be? What are the checks and balances here on people doing this? And at the beginning, when they pass this kind of legislation, they always say, oh, there's plenty of checks and balances. You know, there have to be two opinions. The individual can't have mental illness,
right. ...
And now in the Netherlands, even if you have mental illness, you can choose to do this. And you can ask to be euthanized. You know, these are the most vulnerable people. Yeah. They have a mental condition. They need our help, our love, our support. And we're abandoning them in the most vulnerable moment.
No, it's like this young man in Canada who posted that online video. He lined up all the medications he was taking, had severe mental difficulties, and took his own life, drove to a hotel and took his own life.
Nothing but tragedy.
Yeah, and how do you, but when a society, when a government begins to not only protect that, but advocate it in some cases, I worry about the financial motives of family. You know, want to get grandma off the scene. Look, she's suffering. Look how terrible she looks. Give her the pill. When that mentality starts to enter and take hold, it transforms a people.
It absolutely does. And it's not just the family, but it may be the insurance companies. It may be the hospitals. There's growing pressure from hospital systems to limit what they call feudal care. And sometimes that's not clearly defined, what we're talking about here.
Well, when you look at somebody like John McCain, he's 80, he's got a brain tumor. Okay, it was removed, but how many more years does he have? What's the quality of life? Someone could look at that and say, you know what? Maybe it's time to assign him to the hospice unit.
That's right. And
people, when Obamacare was being wheeled out, this was part of the discussion, that so much of the care and the expense of that care takes place at the end of life. We have to do something to curtail it. The death panels were an answer, and hospice was waved about as an option.
Yes, and it's certainly true that at the end of life, that's when most gets spent. Sure. But you need to structure a system where at the end of life, you know, if you're healthy your whole life, and then at the end you get sick, that's when you want medical care.
Right.
It should be structured so that it's set up to care and spend a certain amount, a reasonable amount on people. And I think the temptation here is to, you know, cut into that in a way that's unjust after people have paid into the system for their whole lives.
Father Tad Pacholczyk, always great talking to you. Thank you for the insights.
Great to be with you.
For more on Father Tad's work, you can read his commentaries at the National Catholic Bioethics Center's website, ncbcenter.org.